Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm for Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today, what I do have in it is Persona 3 Revolted. This game, it is actually very expensive on Steam at the moment, but it is available on Game Pass if you decide to subscribe it. And yes, I decided to use the Game Pass version as a benchmark for this game. So, what can I tell about this game? This game it is very lightweight. This time around, Persona it is using Unreal Engine 4, which is something that it is the first time for Atlas on a Persona game. Usually, what we do see is Atlas using their in-house technology, but it seems that they move on to Unreal Engine 4 in this specific game, and it's actually working excellent. There are the typical Unreal Engine issues that I will talk a little bit more forward in the video, but what you should know it is if you target 1080p and put the game at maximum settings, the frame rate will be pretty much 120 frames per second, which is the maximum you can have. Some areas you might have like 90 frames per second, but I mean, this is a turn-based game. Even if the game would be running at 30 frames per second, you would be fine. So yeah, it's very lightweight, no big issues at all. 1440p. If you go with maximum settings, you can also have like 60 frames per second or above. I'm not expecting the game to sustain 60 frames per second all the time with 1440p maximum settings, but I'm assuming that the overall experience will be well and above 60 frames per second with some special areas running below of that. 4K it is a different story though. 4K whatever if you go with maximum settings or the lowest settings, the difference in performance it is quite small. The only difference I really noticed was the shadow resolution, and actually that didn't really impact too much the performance. It was mostly just memory usage. That even for our graphic cards is not really a big issue, since the game it is not using too much VRAM. Now, now that I've talked about the basics, the frame rate, and everything, the question is: this is an Unreal Engine 4 title, right? And what about shader compilation issues, stuttering, the typical stuff that we see in Unreal Engine titles on PC? Does this game have shader compilation issues? Well, the answer is unfortunately yes. There are some shader compilation issues, although unfortunately for us, they are quite small stutters, alright. They are noticeable at probably the first hour, because every new action you trigger a stutter, but overall the experience it gets smooth very quickly, and it doesn't really surprise me because Persona games are usually spent in the same areas, alright, with the same attacks, with the majority having the same enemies. So most of the stuttering are just not going to get repeated too much times or to get repeated, because I mean you don't have too much stuttering because the game is very repeatable, very, and that's no surprise. And any person that has played Persona games before, they are aware that we are always in the same places, always using the same attacks. Sometimes you get a different type of enemy when you get to a new dungeon, you get new types of enemies, and by then you might have a stutter or two, a new stutter or two every new attack. But I mean, the majority of the time, you are not going to get those stutters. I'm not excusing Atlas in here. I think they should have covered the shader compilation issue, but fortunately for them, that's not something that you will see that much. Also, let me add that those shader compilation stutters, they are very small, possibly because this is a low graphically profiled game, so it's not really a very heavy game, neither on VRAM side, neither on GPU or CPU. So probably those stutters, thanks to that, they are also more smaller, more unnoticeable. I've seen Steam forums and there are many people saying that they don't notice anything, but they are here. Alright. So yeah, that is shader compilation issues, although you are not going to get it too much due to the game's nature, and also they are actually, unfortunately for us, very small. The second thing that I want to talk about this game is that the performance settings, I've seen a lot of complaints regarding that. I've seen people saying that the settings don't save. I've seen people saying that they can't lock the menus to 60 frames per second, or the menus are rendered at a lower resolution than what the game is currently having. During this video, I actually had one of those issues. So all my menus are locked to 30 frames per second for some reason. And a couple of hours ago, I decided to take the game for another spin, and it was at 60 frames per second. So there are some issues with the game's menus performance. Sometimes it works at half refresh rate, sometimes it works normally. I don't know what the hell is going on, but I do hope that Atlas to fix that. I'm not expecting it. Japanese developers, they don't really care that much about PC, or they do really take a lot of time for that to fix that. But yeah, that's an issue. Fortunately, it's just the menu, so no big deal in my opinion. Alright, that's the second thing. There is a third thing though. On the graphics menu, unfortunately, you barely have any options. So you just have resolution, you just have the VSync, you have the shadow quality, the type of window if you want borderless or full screen, which is always nice to have. And you have the shadow quality, like I did said, you have frame rate limiters. The frame rate limiter are just 30, 60 or 120, which means that you have a higher refresh rate screen. You are going to get stuck with 120 frames per second, which is a little bit, oh god, bad. But I think the worst of it all, it's just reflections. Reflections is not working for people that doesn't have a ray tracing graphics card. I'm not saying that the game doesn't have any reflection. That's a lie. The game has a lot of screen space reflections and a lot of other types of reflections working on. But that option, despite it is called only reflections, it is way more than that. That option, it is ray tracing reflections. It should be hidden from the GTX users like us, because that option, it is not doing anything. Whatever if you put it on yes or on or off, it's just going to be the same. You are not going to get worse or better performance, and there is virtually no difference regarding graphics when you activate or deactivate that option, because that option is exclusive for GPUs that does support ray tracing. So Nvidia, the newest AMD cards, the Intel Arc series, they will notice a difference in performance and also in quality wise on reflections. Reflections are applied to the mirrors and to a lot of stuff that is something that we don't have too much in here. So yeah, despite it says that we are having reflections on, the thing is, it just don't work for us on GTX users. And like I said, we still have reflections. You just don't get the ray tracing reflections, which is used on mirrors and stuff like that. Digital Foundry did cover that a little bit, and it seems that the Xbox Series S also doesn't have ray tracing reflections. And the Series X and PS5, they do have the ray tracing reflections at 4K 60 frames per second, although in some areas the performance even does drop below 60 frames per second thanks to that. So I think that's all that I want to talk about Persona 3 Reloaded performance and Real and everything. You already know what to expect. If you play at 1080p, performance is awesome. 1440p 60 frames per second, might be unstable in some areas. 4K, I decided to test with two different settings, the lowest settings possible and the maximum settings possible, and both of them barely had any difference. So 4K just runs at 30 frames per second or slightly above, and sometimes it might drop below 30. So hard to recommend. I would say to stick up with 1080p maximum settings, but it's fine if you want to play at 1440p with 60 frames per second or even 30. I mean, this is a JRPG. Why do you need that big performance? I want it because I want the game smooth, but it's not really necessary gameplay wise. Even 30 frames per second would be enough. This is a turn-based game. So I think that's all that I want to talk about the performance. In case you want to jump to any specific timestamp, there is links on the description of the video. In case you have any questions, just leave the question on the comment section. So thank you a lot for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Wow. I'm sorry, I missed.
No. That's right.
I had no idea.
Come on, go. Keep it up. Go.
Wow. Your stop said he horn.
Knowing how
What to do?
Orpheus!
Yes.
Okay. Looks like I'm up. Here goes. Check this out. Persona!